Welcome back guys. After discussing about the ascending tracts, now let's discuss about the descending tracts. Okay, now we are entering into the motor nervous system. So let's take the heading descending tracts. Now, how many ascending tracts that we have discussed? See, we have discussed about the two types of ascending tracts. One is the anterolateral tracts, and we also have discussed about the dorsal column tracts. Anterolateral tracts are carrying the general sensations and the dorsal column tracts carrying the advanced sensations. In the same way, the descending tracts are also of two types. One is called as a corticospinal tracts and second one is called as a extrapyramidal tracts. So what is the difference between these two tracts, corticospinal and extrapyramidal? Now just label A and B here. Okay, right, A and B. Now students, what exactly is this A? Look, see, right now I am discussing about the precentral gyrus. Okay, so this area that I am highlighting right now, this is the precentral gyrus. It's not the postcentral gyrus, precentral gyrus, and you know precentral gyrus is your motor cortex. So right now I am discussing about the motor cortex. Okay, now this is your motor cortex. Here is your motor cortex, and motor cortex is giving rise to these neurons. Now what is the name of these neurons? These neurons are called as the bed cells. Okay, these neurons are arising from the layer number 5 of the neocortex. You know, this neocortex is having the layers, 6 layers are there. Now this motor neurons are arising from where? The motor neurons are arising from the layer number 5 of the neocortex. Now where these motor neurons are coming? The motor neurons straight away they are coming down through the midbrain, pons and medulla. They are coming down. So as they are coming down, you can call them as the descending tracts. Yes, you can call them as descending tracts. Now in the lower medulla, in the lower part of the medulla, these neurons are crossing to opposite side, you can see. So this crossing is called as a pyramidal decussation. Okay, pyramidal decussation. Now 80% of these motor neurons, 80% of the motor neurons will cross to the opposite side, and where they are going? After crossing to the opposite side, they are entering into the spinal cord. Okay. Now can I call this as? Okay, can I call this as cortico? Because starting from the cortex, corticospinal means entering into the spinal cord. So corticospinal tracts. But be more specific. They are entering into the which column of the spinal cord? They are entering into the lateral column of the spinal cord. So they are called as a lateral corticospinal tracts. Okay, so that's why I have written here lateral corticospinal tracts. Okay, so now tell me, what is the first type of descending tract that you are discussing? The first type of descending tract that you are discussing is the corticospinal tracts. In corticospinal tracts, the first subtype is called as the lateral corticospinal. But what about the remaining 20% of the motor neurons? So the remaining 20%, see, the remaining 20% of the motor neurons, they are not crossing to the opposite side. They are not crossing to the opposite side in the medulla. See, in the medulla, they are not crossing. They are coming down into the spinal cord. Into which column of the spinal cord? See, they are actually entering into the anterior column of the spinal cord. See, this is the anterior column definitely. So they are entering into the anterior column of the spinal cord. So that's why they are called as anterior corticospinal tracts. So that's it. So successfully what we have completed? We have completed the first type of descending tract, that is called as the corticospinal tracts. And how many types of corticospinal do you know? There is something called as a lateral corticospinal and anterior corticospinal. Lateral corticospinal crosses at the level of lower medulla. Anterior corticospinal, see, anterior corticospinal is crossing in the spinal cord. Look at this anterior corticospinal. See this anterior corticospinal. See this one. The anterior corticospinal, yes, it is also crossing to opposite side. But where? Not in the medulla, but in spinal cord. Okay, sir. What these motor neurons are doing? See, finally, these motor neurons, if you concentrate, they are coming into which horns? They are coming into the ventral horns of the spinal cord. They are coming into the ventral horn of the spinal cord. Now, what they are doing? See, they are coming into the ventral horns and they are controlling one more motor neuron. See, this is the motor neuron that I am highlighting. This motor neuron, it's going where? It's going to the skeletal muscles. It will cause the contraction of the skeletal muscles. Already we have discussed this in the basics. The ventral horns of the spinal cord are motor in nature. They will use the motor neurons. Okay, that will cause the contraction of the skeletal muscles. So it is this motor neuron which is going to the skeletal muscles and causing the contraction of the skeletal muscles. Now you tell me, how many motor neurons are there? In this motor pathway, there are two motor neurons involved. One is coming from the cortex. See, this is the one. Okay, this is the one. So this is called as the upper motor neuron. This upper motor neuron, it is trying to control this lower motor neuron. Lower motor neuron goes to the muscles and cause the contraction of the muscles. In a sensory pathway, see, in a sensory pathway, there is first order neuron, second order neuron and third order neuron. 3 orders of neurons are there. But in the motor pathway, in the descending pathway, only 2 motor neurons are there. One is the upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron. Upper motor neuron from the cortex and lower motor neuron from the spinal cord. It's the lower motor neurons which goes to the skeletal muscles and cause the contraction of the skeletal muscles. Okay. Now, I will show you two statements. You just read them and tell me whether they are true or false. Okay. 80% of the upper motor neurons, 80% of the upper motor neurons cross to the contralateral side and travels as lateral corticospinal tracts. 80% travels as the lateral corticospinal tracts. Yes, the crossing occurs in the lateral medulla. True. Is a true statement. Next, 20% of the remaining 20% of the upper motor neurons do not crosses in the medulla and travels as anterior corticospinal tracts and do cross, and they also cross to the opposite side at the level of spinal cord. So they are also crossing, but in the spinal cord. Okay. Yes, these two statements are true. These two statements are true. Next, one more statement I am asking you. You tell me the upper motor neurons arising from the post-central gyrus, true or false? So immediately students will think, sir, upper motor neurons are coming from the pre-central gyrus but not the post-central gyrus. Guys, let me tell you. See, upper motor neurons, take this heading, upper motor neurons arises from where? Sir, 60%, 30 plus 30, 60% they are arising from pre-central gyrus. They are arising from the pre-central gyrus. But 40%, this is important, 40% of the upper motor neurons are also arising from the post-central gyrus, which means the post-central gyrus, which is the somatosensory cortex. It's also giving rise to upper motor neurons. So, from this, what you can say, the somatosensory cortex is not only sensory cortex, but it is also a motor cortex. It is also giving rise to upper motor neurons. Okay. So, the post-central gyrus is not only doing the sensory functions, but it is also doing the motor functions. Okay. So, yes, that's the third important MCQ which I want you to know. 80% crossing in the lower medulla, remaining 20% crosses in the spinal cord, and the post-central gyrus will also give rise to 40% of the upper motor neurons. So, with this successfully what we have completed the first type of descending tract, that's the corticospinal. How many types of corticospinal? Lateral corticospinal, anterior corticospinal. Both the lateral corticospinal, anterior corticospinal, they will cross the opposite side, but 80% in the medulla, remaining 20% in the spinal cord. It is upper motor neurons which will control the lower motor neuron. Lower motor neurons control the contraction of the skeletal muscles. Upper motor neurons arises from the cortex here, and the lower motor neurons are arising from the ventral horns of the spinal cord. Okay. Next, look at the B. What we are seeing here, we are not talking anything about the cortex. Now, we will not talk about the cortex. Now, upper motor neurons in this condition, see the upper motor neurons, they are arising from the brainstem nucleus. Okay, the upper motor neurons, from where they are arising? They are arising from this different nuclei in the brainstem. Now, look at this first nucleus. This the nucleus which I am showing in the red color. This is called as red nucleus. So, upper motor neurons are arising from here and coming down into the spinal cord as rubrospinal tract. Rubrospinal, from the red nucleus to the spinal cord. And from the tectal nucleus, see, from this tectal nucleus, these upper motor neurons are also coming down as a tectospinal tract. Tectospinal. And look at this vestibular nucleus. From the vestibular nucleus into the spinal cord, this is called as a vestibulospinal tract. And from the reticular nucleus, from this green one, from the reticular nucleus, again one more tract coming down. This is called as a reticulospinal. So tell me, sir, these upper motor neurons, all they are also upper motor neurons. Where they are coming down? They are coming down into the spinal cord. So can you call them as a descending tracts? Yes, they are descending. They are coming down, downwards. The axons are coming downwards. So definitely they are descending tracts. But can you call them as corticospinal? No, because they are not arising from the cortex. They are arising from the brainstem nuclei. So definitely they are not corticospinal. So they are called as extrapyramidal tracts. And how many types of extrapyramidal tracts do you know? There are 4 types of extrapyramidal tracts, that is rubrospinal, vestibulospinal, reticulospinal, tectospinal. These are the 4 types of extrapyramidal tracts. And now you will be having a doubt. Sir, what these extrapyramidal tracts are doing? Okay, what these extrapyramidal tracts are doing? See, these extrapyramidal tracts, these are also upper motor neurons, definitely. They are, no doubt, they are also upper motor neurons. What do? They will control, again, lower motor neurons. They will also control lower motor neurons. Okay. So these upper motor neurons are controlling the activity of the lower motor neurons, and lower motor neurons, they will go to the skeletal muscles and they will cause the contraction of these muscles. Okay. So the ascending tract or descending tract doesn't matter. The corticospinal tracts or the extrapyramidal tract doesn't matter. They will finally help in the contraction of the muscles. They finally help in the contraction of the muscles. Then you will be having a doubt. Sir, if both are causing the contraction of the muscles, then what is the difference? What is the difference between the corticospinal tract and the extrapyramidal tract? What is the difference between them? See, the difference is the function, the kind of muscle contraction. If I am writing like this, okay, what kind of movement? It's a very fine movement. It's a very fine, advanced, skilled movement. A surgeon performing the surgery, like, tying the knots, okay, or a person who is drawing things. It's a very fine movement. In order to control the fine movements, you need to have the support of the cortex. So, the corticospinal, the first type, the corticospinal, along with one exception, that is the rubrospinal. So these two tracts helps in the advanced, fine, skilled movements in our body. Okay, so they are going to mainly contract the distal muscle group. Distal muscle group means hand muscles mainly. Okay, hand muscles. So like writing, drawing, needlework, kind of. Okay, a female doing embroidery work, needlework. Okay, something like that. So for fine movements, what type of tracts we require? What type of upper motor neurons are required? We require the support of the corticospinal tracts and the rubrospinal tracts. And for the gross motor control, for the gross motor movements, not the fine ones, like maintaining the posture of the body, tone in the muscles, balance. Okay, for that purpose also you need to have the muscle contraction. For maintaining the posture also you need to have the muscle contraction. For maintaining the balance also you need to have the muscle contraction. For that, these extrapyramidal tracts are helping you. So now you understand what is the difference between the corticospinal tracts and extrapyramidal tracts. The difference between them is the type of movement, is the type of muscle contraction. If you want a fine contraction, fine movements, it's the corticospinal along with the rubrospinal. If you want to have any gross movements like maintaining the posture, balance and tone, you need to have the support of, you need to have the extrapyramidal tracts. Okay. So in the recent exam, this question was asked. A person who was having this roller coaster ride, after having a roller coaster ride, he is having this dizziness or vertigo, he is about to fall, but he is trying to stabilize his body, he is trying to balance his body. For that, which tract is helping? Balance ke liye it's the extrapyramidal tract which is helping. So which extrapyramidal tract? Especially it's the vestibulospinal tract, vestibular apparatus, semicircular canals trying to balance the body. Okay. So vestibulospinal tract mainly helps in balance. Balance, very, very important. Okay. And for fine movements, this is what they will ask you. For fine movements, which extrapyramidal tract is required? Rubrospinal tract is required. Okay. For head movements and eye movements, tectospinal tract is required. Okay. Tectospinal is required for eye and head movements. Vestibulospinal especially for the balance, and for fine movements, it's the rubrospinal tract. So these are the two types of descending tracts. I have told you what is the first type of tract. The first type of tracts are corticospinal, from the cortex to spinal cord, and second one is called as the extrapyramidal tract, that is starting from the brainstem, different brainstem nuclei coming down to the spinal cord. And how many types of corticospinal are there? There are two types of corticospinal. That is the lateral corticospinal, which is made up of 80% of the upper motor neurons,